I want to welcome everybody to the next in our series for Base Cybersecurity Institute. I am super excited and privileged to be joined today by four other amazing women in the field, and we're going to have a Women in Cybersecurity Roundtable today. BCI was started in honor and memory of Rebecca Bass, who was a visionary for cybersecurity, and one of her huge wishes was to help mentor and bring up more women in the field. And I know she did that for me, and she also did that for people that I found in the industry and said, oh, you need to talk to Becky. So I think she would have really enjoyed this roundtable. It was hard to choose the types of people that I wanted to present, because cybersecurity offers so much for so many different types of career paths and different types of interests. And so today I'm joined by people that represent different areas: academic, government, big business, and we have a student who's still working on her master's and just starting out. So I really wanted to show the diversity of possibilities in cybersecurity. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first guest, which is Jean Pollack.
Hi, I am so happy to be with all of you here on BCI. I was one of the co-founders of BCI, and I miss Becky every day of my life now. I had the fortune of meeting her about 2002 or so when she came out to Silicon Valley. And she was just a delightful person. But a little bit about me. I am one of those people beset by curiosity. I want to know, what is it, why it works, what if we changed it a little bit, what would happen? And I read everything I could as a child and figured out what I think I liked the most was genetics, computers, and emerging technology. So I had the fortune of becoming a software developer after my plans to become a geneticist fell through. I fell in love with working on payment systems and a lot of the early ATM teller machines, where I developed a real interest in cryptography. I grew up in a relatively poor area and had the mindset of a thief. So, money going through the wires was an interesting thing in the 1980s. And so eventually that led me to write automatic teller machine transfer networks. It's otherwise known as electronic funds transfer. We did a lot of the early home banking in early 1980s. Unfortunately, at that point, PCs cost about $10,000 and not too many people had them at home. Worked a lot on point of sale systems and ended up eventually working for AT&T and Bell Labs on telephone switching systems. Eventually, my work writing automatic teller machine networks for the exchange led me out here to Seattle, where I ended up working on a lot more of the telephone switching systems, 911 systems, and all kinds of other things. I eventually ended up working in Silicon Valley for Tandem Computers, a wonderful company that did a lot of work with parallel computing and clustering, and a lot of the work on SQL and stuff that you use today came out of there. It was the Google of its day. But in the early 1990s, I ended up as Tandem Computers webmaster, and I noticed there's no security. So we started looking around and we figured out that PKI is this really interesting technology. What can we do with it? So we ended up developing a product. We sold it to Singapore's Net Trust system to become their basic identity management system, and went on from there into, still at Tandem, into the electronic commerce world. Because I had a background in banking and healthcare and the internet, I'm sorry, it was internet shopping. What can I tell you? It was not good in the long run, but it was very interesting at the time. I did a lot of standards work. I was a standards representative for Tandem at W3C, IETF, the Object Management Group, the PKI Forum, and a bunch of other things. That was a very interesting world until we were taken over by Compaq, and I just decided it was time for me to leave. Eventually, I came back to Silicon Valley in the early 2000s. As I said, I worked for Visa for many years. I helped set up their entire security response. I was a security architect for their global foray into security. Not to say that they weren't secure before, but we went much, much deeper, created a 5-year plan, raised hundreds of millions of dollars from around the world, and rolled it out. So I'm very, very proud of that. During that time, we also started the Cloud Security Alliance. I was one of the initial co-founders in late 2008, early 2009. Having worked with ISSA for many, many years, the Information Security Association, I was named as one of their distinguished fellows, and later on I was named by SC Magazine as a woman of influence in security. During that time, I've worked as a CISO, a VP, as a developer, all kinds of things. So now I'm back in Seattle again. I'm doing executive consulting for many different kinds of companies. Sometimes I'm a CISO, sometimes an architect. But I'm still always questioning and trying to learn and create and mentor people. Mentoring is a really important part of my life right now. And I always talk to people about the security industry. It was originally called information security. Now it's called cybersecurity. It was a little bit of hard transition for me to keep calling it cyber. But we helped start the Base Security Institute in recognition of Becky's efforts. We miss Info Mom.
Yeah.
That's it. It's too much to talk about. I think I took up too much time here.
Thank you, Jean.
On to the next person.
It's wonderful to see the progression and to hear some of the stories. So thank you so much.
Right.
Kiara, Philogene is up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kiara. I am the student on the panel. I graduated in 2019 from the University of Tampa with my bachelor's in cybersecurity, and I decided to continue my education, and now I attend the University of San Diego, where I'm attaining my master's in cybersecurity operational leadership. What started out as I started college as a math major, and I didn't know what I wanted to be. I just loved math at the time. I was a math nerd. Always took part in any math clubs or math classes on campus. And I decided I don't know what I want to do, so let's go into business. And when I decided to transfer to the University of Tampa, my advisor at the time introduced me to cybersecurity. And what it took both my love for business and math and made a small twist on it. And I did my research before signing up for the major. And I thought, this is something that's going to challenge me. This is something that's going to make me question what I work on and what I'm learning. And that's exactly what it did. And it pushed me past my limits. But it also helped me grow as an individual. So going into the field, I needed to build my resume in some way, whether it was an internship, joining a club. And I inquired about a laptop from a company I interned with. And that inquiry turned into a internship as a SOC analyst. And there I got to really learn and apply what I was learning in school to the actual real world. And that's why I always stress myself to continue my education while working. And I currently work for a company called Markham LLP, where I do cyber and risk advisory services. So that's SOC audits, high trust, PCI. We're usually the people you don't want to see, but you see on an annual basis. We're going to be questioning you. We're looking at everything about your system and scope, ensuring that your security is in place, controls are operating effectively. And it has really opened my eyes. Going into the field, there is no class on auditing in school at my institution, and I learned a lot along the way. But I've had great mentors, great managers, great senior managers that guided me along the way, and I am so thankful that I took the position, even though I'm in school still, because applying what you learn in class to the real world helps you grow as an individual and as a professional, and you really get a better scope of what you're doing in the world of cybersecurity. It's not as technical, but I do love the work, and I get to see across the technicality across different industries. I don't have to apply it. I just analyze it and give feedback. So I am so thankful to be on this panel with these wonderful professionals, and I've learned so much from you already, and I'm so glad to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiara. Rebecca Mercury is up next.
So yes, thank you very much for inviting me. And as well, I also knew Becky Bass. I would meet her, run into her at many different types of conferences, and she would attend the conferences, but she really didn't really attend the conferences. She would plan herself out in the hallway, usually near the back of maybe the conference room so she could go back in or listen or whatever. But she was conferencing with all the people who attended the conference. And so she knew everyone and just would engage people in discussions, and that was just tremendous. And she's certainly not the only person that I know who ever did that. There are, you occasionally will find people like that who are like that with technical conferences or even other conferences. But it was a great way to get to know her, and so I was very glad that this series was started in memory of her. My background, as the picture, is actually of my early days at RCA Laboratories in the Princeton laboratories, right there in Princeton, New Jersey. And RCA, many facilities around the globe, RCA no longer exists. So, this was a well-worn company, and they tried making mainframes. I was not on that project, but I joined them when they were starting to attempt to compete with Apple's. You'll see that is an Apple there. And actually Mike Markula, one of the presidents of Apple, actually stopped by and visited us, did many other luminaries in the field who would stop by from time to time to visit the labs. Now, this never would have happened when David Sarnoff was in charge, because he knew that anybody from another company who was coming in to visit was going to steal our ideas, which in fact they did. But it was sort of fun to meet, people like that. And, this was in the 80s when all this was getting started. Unfortunately, our project really never, it just never got launched. RCA never decided to sell it. They had a smaller gaming type of computer that they did sell as the Cosmac VIP, and these were 8-bit microprocessors. So this was the early days, and just getting color was a big deal, and getting some decent graphics. So I worked on video games. I've always been interested in music. As you can see, I have a Bachelor of Music in Classical Guitar. I spent way too much time in college, but I'm always very interested in different things of learning. My family is very eclectic, with my mother as an English professor and my father as a science high school teacher in the Philadelphia Public Schools, and many other teachers in the family. We also, of my siblings, my brother became an electrical engineer, and my sister became a lawyer, but then she went back to school and she's a STEM educator now. So we're all very, mixed up. We don't really stay with any one thing for a long period of time. We're more breadth rather than depth, but certainly we do have a lot of depth in order to even be able to do the things that we do. But at Sarnoff Labs, they drew on a lot of that. They drew on the fact that I could design hardware, even though my Bachelor of Science degree was in computer science, and that I knew about music and audio and things like that. And then I moved on with from Sarnoff, went back to school to get my master's at Drexel. But then I was always paying for my own education, either by doing work at the school or by getting these other jobs. And so during my PhD, I would work for a few years, stockpile money, then go back to school for a few years, and then go broke again. So then I take a leave of absence. So it was like a back and forth thing. But that gave me the opportunity to go to all these great places. So I worked for Intel when they had a spinoff from the Sarnoff Labs on digital video interactive. And what that really essentially was the ability to have video on like a CD or DVD, and to also do it interactively. And then I wound up at AT&T Bell Labs also on a break, an extended break from graduate school, and worked on virtual meeting rooms. What we have right now, we're in a virtual meeting room, and I was working on this in like the 1990s, in the mid 1990s at AT&T Bell Labs. And I must say that the project that we had was better than anything that is out there. Like, we're saying this is a round table, but it's not a round table. We're just floating heads. Whereas we had icons for each of us around the table, and then projections of us onto the icons. And so we would actually literally be in a virtual meeting room. I worked on the holophonic sound and actually made it so that it really was a three-dimensional sound space, so you could hear the sound not just coming out from this one set of speakers. It would be, you know, virtualized. And people are still working on these things now, but we really don't have a meeting room as good as the one that we had there. Of course, it was running on what really essentially was a mini computer. It was the size of enormous refrigerators. It was a silicon graphics machine, so it was very big number crunching with lots of great graphics. And but it is interesting that, you know, these things are experimented with before they actually wind up, you know, coming to the home, where it's, you know, has to be much less expensive. And all of these places where I worked, I learned a lot, because I was just, you know, how do you write a press release? How do you write a technical paper? How do you give a paper at a conference? I mean, my colleagues were always wonderfully helpful in doing those types of things. I got involved with the ACM and the IEEE that way, and served on the executive boards of many of the local groups. And, you know, so that's, you know, that was sort of how I got my start. And then a lot of things that I tend to, I guess, migrate toward things that have a lot of technicality to them. So when you're doing like compliance testing, standard certification, things like that, you're looking at, you know, multi-hundred-page documents, usually from the government, in extraordinarily boring language, and having to cull that down into, okay, what do they want that has to be exactly right in the part of our product that we have. And I'm really good at that. I wound up doing that for my doctoral dissertation. As part of my doctoral dissertation, I was assessing the security of voting machines. And so that was, so I did actually look at the ISO common criteria. So there are various standards for security. And, you know, there was, before that, there was the Orange Book set of documents from the Department of Defense. And so I really enjoy looking at these, what other people would think are boring, extremely tedious documents, but that's what I like to do. And it is what I wind up doing when I'm doing forensic investigations, because I'm looking at all of the documentation, you know, sometimes hundreds of thousands or even millions of files, to try to find a part of a file. I can't look at all those files. I have to know which ones to hone in on, to find the part of the file that's going to help the client that I'm working for prove their case. So the types of things that I do really involve massive quantities of data and information, but I have to be able to hone down very quickly and figure out what's going wrong. A lot of it, I think, is just because I have this breadth, this large breadth of knowledge that I've created for myself, you know, in my brain over, you know, many decades. So that is what has enabled me to actually be able to do these things. It does amaze people. In the last couple of weeks, I had one client of mine say, "What, are you a computer genius?" So I just laughed and said, "Well, yes, I am. That's why I'm charging you the fee that I'm charging you." So, I mean, I was being facetious. But then I went into another thing where there was a computer that was frozen. That was a completely different, you know, matter that I was dealing with. And I just looked at their computer, and I just looked, you know, looked at their screen, and just went bloom on their keyboard and immediately unfroze it. And like the people were like, what? How did you know what to do? And again, I can't even tell you how I know what to do. It's just that I have all this information in my head, and my brain just works to sort of figure out how to put the connections together. So that is really how I got to be where I am now, where I basically am doing, I still do some technical writing and training, I did do a lot of teaching along the way too, but I don't find myself, I'm sort of glad I'm not teaching now. I don't know how I would survive the COVID, to teach in that environment. I like student interaction. So I do more mentoring of students. Students will come to me, or small groups will come to me, or give talks. But most of my work is digital forensic investigations and expert testimony. And again, I'm reading and writing large documents of excruciating detail. And I've had to learn a lot about the law. I continue to be a constant learner. A lot of the courses I take right now are from Harvard. They have edX, where you can take, courses that would cost you like $5,000 to take at Harvard, but you can take for $50 over edX with the actual professors and the real material. So that's how I stay up to speed on my knowledge, and I'm constantly reading scientific publications. So that's my background. Notable Software is my company. And just one other plug for myself is that I've been tweeting daily about voting issues, election issues on Twitter. So you can find me at Notable Mercury, and just follow me there, or just go and read all my extended tweets. But there's lots of information there. So I'm hoping to go viral, but haven't totally gone viral yet. I had one tweet that really went pretty far, but not completely viral. So, okay, so I guess that's enough about me.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. That was great.
You're welcome.
Next up is Dana Wilcox.
Hi, I am Dana Woolcock, and I come from Barracuda Networks. I'm a director of cross engineering there. And I got to cybersecurity on a not so straight path. So in 2005, when I graduated from high school, I decided that I wanted to be a teacher, and that was what I was going to do. And I started, and I promptly decided that that was a really bad idea. So I shifted to computer science, which is what I was studying as my minor initially when I went in to be a teacher. And that landed me an awesome internship in 2008 with SPAWAR in South Carolina. And I spent 3 months there doing a lot of different things, mainly around technical writing and getting to be part of very technical conversations around Humvees. And I came back to U of M Flint, where I had been studying at the end of that internship, and I got a job in the IT help desk there. Which led me to my first full-time job in 2010. And I continued going to school throughout all of this time, and continued working on my computer science degree. And then 2010, 2011, I was struggling in a couple of my classes with understanding how the teachers were presenting the material, and working on trying to get assistance from those teachers, and it was not going well. I was not able to get the assistance in the direction I needed, and I decided I really wanted to graduate, and I really wanted to continue on in my journey. And so I flip-flopped my major and my minor, and at this point I was going for technical writing with computer science focus. So I flip-flopped, and I went to the English degree, and I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna transition. I'm gonna get my English degree. I'm gonna get a computer science minor. I'm like 4 classes away from having my bachelor's degree in computer science. Probably should someday go back and, finish that up. But in 2011, I finally graduated, so 6 years after I started. And that was probably the proudest moment that I had up to that point was, I finished, I actually did it. I made it to the end. There were bumps in the road along the way, but I did it. And then in 2013, I got a big promotion, and I started running the IT help desk at U of M Flint. And at that point I had 1 child. And in 2015, my daughter, my second child, was 3 months old, and my son came to me and he says, "Do you have to work again, Mommy?" I was regularly working late evenings on the weekends, solving problems. I was in customer service. That was what I did. And I decided I couldn't do this. I couldn't keep up with both kids and working all those hours, and I needed to completely start fresh. So in 2015, I took a job out of management, doing QA at Barracuda Networks. I went back to just being responsible for me. responsible for my job, what I was working on. And this was my first step into cybersecurity. So I had been really involved in the computer science program and in IT, but I'd never really been involved in cybersecurity. So I took that, and in 2017, along the way, as I was doing QA, my team started to notice I had skills in other areas outside of just what I was doing with QA, and our QA had kind of wind down just a little bit. And so I started doing other tasks. And in 2017, I was offered the opportunity to actually manage the cross-engineering team at Barracuda Networks. I loved it. I really enjoyed every minute of it. I enjoyed my team. We've been able to accomplish so many different things, and I've learned so much about cybersecurity already, and I'm really itching to learn more. And then this year, I had a goal, and I was going to achieve this goal, and I was going to become, a director. And this year I accomplished my goal, and I am now director of cross engineering. And so now I need to come up with a new goal, but my new goal requires me to learn even more about cybersecurity. And so that's how my journey of getting to cybersecurity and where I am today has gotten me. And it's, for me, it's just a continuous reminder that nothing is ever a straight line. And you're not going to go from A to B without some bumps in the road. And sometimes those bumps push you in a direction that you didn't even know you wanted to go. And in 2005, if you had asked me, where are you going to be in 2020, I would have never told you I'm going to be in cybersecurity and I'm going to be running a team. Like that was the furthest thing from what I thought possible at that point in time in my life. And so today, being here with these wonderful, amazing women and talking to everybody is just something that I never pictured myself doing. So it's an honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to continuing talking with you ladies.
Thank you, Dana. And next up is me. I do a lot of these introductions for the webinar, but I don't talk about myself a lot. I've had the joy of starting my own business with my husband, and we actually started it back in '93, so it's been a very long time, and worked on it since then. That company is still existent. That's our primary focus. I knew from a very early age that I loved programming. I learned my first programming language when I was 11, and I was, one of those things that I always wanted to go into. And so I sort of started off with, I want to do programming and development. And one of the interesting things, one of the things that I think is really wonderful about starting your own business and being an entrepreneur is that you get to do something sort of different every day. I've done marketing, I've done operations, I've done sales. You come in at the start of the day and you don't know whether you're, like Rebecca said, writing a press release, or you're going to be working on some coding or consulting to people. And so it's one of the things that I discovered that I learned along the way, that I discovered that I really loved, was doing an entrepreneur. We started, my husband and I co-founded a second company that's on here as Cybersecurity back in about 2003, and we got venture capital for that, and we had 12 employees, and I started off as the VP of engineering, and I discovered that I really liked the coordination that happens between the groups. You're developing a product, but it has to meet a specific need. How do you talk about that need? How do you market that need? How do you work with the sales guys so that they understand what that entails, and so forth? And so I discovered through that process that I really liked operations. Eventually I became the COO, and then we had a short period where we didn't have a CEO, and I became the CEO for that time. I liked taking all the moving bits and being able to move them around and get them to all line up to a specific goal. So that was one of the things that I learned. And then, the last one, I sort of wrote this slide with the things I love most in the world about business. And the last one is invention. I really like taking a problem that people think is impossible or challenging or insurmountable, and trying to find a solution that works, that not only provides a technical fix, but also is something that people can actually use in the real world, that's something that people can understand. And so I've written several patents along the way, been granted one, I think, or three or something, and had some technologies that came out of that that we spun off into new businesses. The people paying close attention will notice there's some parallelism here. So while mine is drawn as a straight line, I really like Dana's slide where it was all squiggles and wiggles, because I think that it never is. It never is as straightforward as it looks. You have, five things in the fire, and you're trying to figure out which one's going to come out first, and you kind of just sort of work with it as you go. So I think that's a little bit about me. I'd like to, now we're going to turn it over and start talking about some specific questions. So the first one I have for the group is, what aspects of cybersecurity are you involved with? And Dana, would you like to get that started for us?
Sure. So for me, I'm most involved with providing the internal and cross-functional tooling within our company. So we do things that our products need. Our products are our security products that we offer to customers, and my team kind of handles the glue and some of the security aspects in the middle, and also helps with vulnerabilities and things that might affect more than one product. We help coordinate the efforts on those. We also help with kind of standardization and kind of bringing teams together to have those conversations about how we can grow as a company and how we can improve our security offering as a company. So my customers are also my coworkers in my case. And so that's how I'm involved with cybersecurity, and I'm starting a little bit more as in the recent months, kind of outward facing and working with other groups even outside of engineering, and hopefully continuing to actually even get to work with some of our partners and find out what it is that they're looking for and the things that they're interested in from our products.
How long does that process take between, you find a particular issue and you need to coordinate it out with, I'm assuming, several divisions or groups? Is that a long process, or do you need to I'm working late today sort of process?
It really depends. We've had some that are drop everything, this needs to be fixed right now. And we've had some that take years to really process through. It depends on the severity. It depends on the attack surface of whatever it is that we're working on. If it's something that you're really not going to be able to get to, we can work on it. If it's, just general security enhancements, technology changes throughout and that's what I like most about cybersecurity, I think, is technology changes. So what was secure and what was the gold standard, 10 years ago is not anymore. And so there may not be anything wrong with it, but there may be something better now. And that's a lot of kind of what we look at. We replace tooling that is commonly used that it was great back then, and now, maybe we should think about it, or maybe we should use this cool new tool. We use Go a lot more now, and obviously that's a relatively new language, but it's working really well on replacing a lot of things that we did in Perl previously. And so we want to continue to upgrade things. So it's not even always just there's a problem, but sometimes it's just there's a better way to do this.
Great. Rebecca, we're talking about what aspects of security are you involved with?
Sure. So, so again, consistent with the certification type of stuff, a lot of what I do involves looking at what the security aspects are, and also trying to find holes in them based on how they were certified and what standards they were certified to. So even like simple engineering things like mean time between failures. Okay, so I do a lot of stuff with voting, but a lot of that is pro bono. So very little of that is actually paid, but it's sort of a outgrowth of my research. So, and it continues with my research. But think about it. So you've got now these on-site voting precincts that are set up for, they're going to be voting at these for like 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks. I think some started last week. Okay, are these going to be kept up continuously? Are they powering them down in between? But it's like maybe 8-12 hours a day. Who knows, how long that is. Well, I can tell you that the standard or the guideline for voting systems is 156-hour mean time between failure. So that includes the time it took them at the warehouse to set the machines up and what it's going to take them to run the votes off at the end of the election session. So you've got all of that time window. And now we're going to leave these machines on and running, or we're going to just shut them off and cycle them up and down, and that's another problem. So things like mean time between failures is really an engineering constraint, but people don't think about that. And if you have made this rather poor, weak standard, then you're going to have problems. So other aspects of cybersecurity that I deal with, a lot of times in my criminal defense work, deals with remote surveillance. Okay, now we do still have the Constitution, at least this week, but who knows how much longer we're going to have it. But we still have the Constitution right now, where we do have a right to privacy and certain rights. These in our Bill of Rights. These were amended on, not in the original founding fathers wrote them. They added these on later. So, but these rights that we have are really, a lot of people are saying just being violated constantly. So if you're using any type of file sharing, whether it be Dropbox or Google or whatever, so that is opening a window into your computer where you're sharing your files if they're located locally. And so this other software is being written that will circumvent some of the security controls that might or might not be in the software that you're using, especially if you're using, like peer-to-peer file sharing. So basically what happens is law enforcement, the government is law enforcement. Okay, so the government, I'm not saying to defund the police, but I'm just putting it in its proper perspective. Okay, so the government is prosecution, the judges, and law enforcement. And so the government is actually constantly 24/7 running these surveillances constantly throughout, not just the United States, but throughout the globe, but they're surveilling on our own people. And so the question is, when they then come knocking on your door with a search warrant and say that they can take your computers because they believe you have some child pornography, how do we know they didn't plan it? And, how can we even know anything about what's going on with this? And so one of the things I've been instrumental in doing is helping to get court orders to turn over this software. This is modified software. I mean, I could go to the regular peer-to-peer software and analyze that, and maybe that's hokey too. But the stuff that the government is actually using for the surveillance, we're talking all entities, FBI, state, local police, they're using this, and they're constantly surveilling everybody. So, and I had one guy who turned on the peer-to-peer software, and 15 minutes later, the cops were on his computer. How did he get child pornography on his computer within 15 minutes? I don't know about this. Anyway, but it's interesting. The whole thing is very interesting. And what we find is that when we push to try to get that software, all of a sudden, a really good plea deal comes up from the prosecutor because they do not want this stuff revealed. Same way with the voting system. They do not want the voting system software codes revealed. So that has not been made a requirement. Only New York State has the requirement that the source code be put into escrow and such. So we really don't know what's running in any of these systems, and that's a lot of what I do. So I'm working, sort of on this line between the technology and what people are doing and using it for, and trying to gain access to see what it is that's actually going on. So that's where my cybersecurity is. It's like on, we could just call it the boundary. It's that boundary line that I'm looking at. Stuff is here going this way and stuff is here going, and I'm looking at what is that interface, what is that software. So I'm not trying to fix it, I'm just trying to figure out what is actually going on. and I've been pretty successful in doing that. Or they just want to just, make her go away. So we'll just, make that case end very quickly. So, I mean, I really would like to see the software. I would prefer to do that as opposed to, I mean, but the client, the client is always the one that we're trying to work for. So, but anyway, it is very, that's largely what I do. But again, it involves that, looking at how these things are designed, and the fact that I have hardware and software design in my background, both aspects of that, as well as I'm a amateur extra FCC licensed radio operator. So I know a lot about wireless and stuff too. So all those technologies, digital and analog. Okay. I guess that's it for me on that question.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Jean, would you like to go next?
I currently am spending a lot of time looking at various emerging technologies. It's just something I've always loved, and I'm always looking for new ways to break things. And so I'm looking right now, of course, at all the IoT things and all the smart, whatever they are, cities, cars, whatever, homes. I'm also I've done a lot of research into blockchain, what's going on cryptographically, as well as what's going on in the world of AI. And these things are all tying together now. And so when you talk about privacy, Rebecca, for example, all I can think of is Ed Snowden revealing to the world of all these sorts of things that were going on. I mean, they were sort of known in the community, but nobody really talked about it. And so as people start realizing what's going on, privacy, of course, is something that has always fascinated me, in protecting data, making sure that you don't inadvertently expose things. Because, you start looking into the hackers and the whole world of what's going on there, and all the forensics that you have to do. And the constant learning is really, really interesting. So I bring that to my role as a CISO and as a consultant to various companies.
It's not just a focus on the technology, but how the technology actually impacts our daily lives, right?
What absolutely. Does it actually mean? I mean, one of the things you do have to do is be very proficient in talking to business folks, because they don't understand what we're talking about when we talk jargon. And so I've learned to talk about cryptography in terms of secret codes, for example. Everybody understands a secret code. Cryptography is like, oh, that's that math stuff. What do we need that for?
Great. Kiara?
So I work on the compliance side of cybersecurity. So no two companies are the same, but there are standards in place. So what we do is we go through a control set for each company that we audit, and we look at anything from logical access, physical security, risk assessment, risk management, and we ensure that the controls that are in place are not only in place, but also operating effectively. So I get to look at your firewall settings, your administrative access. Do the appropriate personnel have access to either source code or access to deploy? Is there a change management process in place? Is it approved? Are employees just able to just make changes and deploy them, or is there a process in place where management approves it? So across different industries, you'll see different things. I primarily work with SOC. I've touched and dabbled in high trust and PCI. So it's very interesting to see. With SOC, it's kind of a gray area you can dabble into, but with PCI, it's black and white. It's either it's operating or it's not. And we, at the end of our audits, we always give recommendations. So it's great to be able to also, I feel like, take a role in consulting with giving them recommendations and how they can improve from what we've observed over the audit period. So I love the client work. I love speaking with clients and interacting with them. And also we get to travel. Right now we don't because of COVID, but you get to actually get to understand the system you're auditing and also your client. And it's very, very interesting what you learn along the way. So I love it. So
that was one of
the talk about PCI.
You worked on the initial system. That was
one of my first projects when I started with the company. It was in PCI.
I wouldn't admit to it for years.
That was one of the things I also loved about consulting, was that you get to see a lot of different types of systems, and you get to sort of get this perspective where you're pulling in information from different companies. So I loved the diversity, and people use technology in the most surprising ways you could ever anticipate. You're like, here, I've given you a widget to do X. Oh, look, I applied it to Z and the bathroom terminal or whatever. Well, okay, I guess that works. So that's one of the things I liked.
So one of the things I got to experience was, I don't know if you ever made a doctor's appointment and you get a text message to remind you. I'm auditing a company at the moment that actually sends those messages out for the doctors. So just to see that, receiving that and then actually auditing it and seeing how it actually operates and how it's set up, it's really interesting. New perspective on it.
Yeah.
Right, all the HIPAA constraints. So I actually have a bunch of paper. I used to write a column for called Security Watch for Communications EACM. You can find them on my website. And I wrote a column about HIPAA, all the HIPAA requirements, and those are so they're good that they are in place, but that it sounds like you were looking out for HIPAA requirements to make sure they were compliant. And I also should add to Jean's thing is that I actually have worked in cases involving hackers, including international rings of hackers. And I worked on, there was an earlier Sony case, before the Sony case, when the video was stolen and, then it was just distributed, the one about the North Korean president and all that. And so that when I saw that happening, I'm like, well, wait, why didn't they fix all the security holes they had? Because I worked on the earlier case to that, where people broke into Sony and were stealing all sorts of stuff, but they didn't shore it up. And that's where we get into that whole idea of risk-benefit analysis. And so I often, every year, I give a talk down at the Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland. There's a bunch of professors down there that goes by Gordon and Loeb. That's their last names. And they have this model for how much money should you invest in cybersecurity, to get the benefits. So if you're going to lose $1 million worth of stuff, you don't want to put $2 million in terms of that. So I always enjoy looking at that. They have this model, so just look it up. I'll just put it on the.
We can have a whole discussion about cybersecurity insurance and
cybersecurity insurance. Yeah, and this model, the Gordon Loeb model, has now been acclaimed as the sort of the model to look at for figuring out these amounts. But yeah, it's great. It's really great.
Yeah, too much lip service.
I want to switch our question to what special challenges have you faced as a woman in the security field? Jean, would you like to get us started on that?
I have had a lot of challenges because I work in very technical areas, in the sense of people challenging my knowledge base. And so I've always switched between being a developer and a programmer, because I find an interesting problem to say, oh, let's go do this. Then it would say, oh, we have no money. Then I'd become a manager to figure out how do we get the money, we do the project. And so I had a lot of folks who are challenging my expertise, shall we say. And so I had to often be able to prove that, hey, I know your job, I can do your job, cut it out, do your work. So that was one of my challenges. The challenge of keeping up, I think, is a challenge for everybody. There's so much going on, there's so many interesting things, and you can't keep up with it, nobody can. I really think of security as an apprenticeship program, as I do with development too, by the way. And so, as you start to learn how to apply security and network with people and make sure that things are going well, networking has always been an interest of mine, because if you don't talk to people about why this is happening and what are some of the root problems, nothing gets fixed. So I've enjoyed working with people from all over the world, so it's been a lot of fun.
Great. Dana?
For me, I alluded to a little bit, school was a little bit of a struggle. I learned differently than the men in my class. And there's lots of studies you can go find that people learn differently. And I did run across a couple teachers who were adamant that they were going to teach one way, and that one way was not the way that I learned. And so those were struggles for me. And I was suggested that maybe it wasn't the right field for me, and that, you know, maybe it wasn't the right direction for me because I wasn't learning in the same way that my classmates were learning. In the end, you know, I was very frustrated at the time. I was also very shy, and I didn't stand up for myself very well. So I decided, you know, I just want to graduate, and I moved, and I did what I could to make sure that I could graduate. And now I look back on it, and I stand up for myself now. I'm not afraid, and I encourage anybody else, stand up for yourself. If
Absolutely.
you know you can do it, don't let somebody convince you that your way of learning is wrong. There are many different ways to learn. Find somebody else to help you. Apply anyway is another one. For many years, I didn't apply for jobs because I didn't check every box. And you don't need to check every box to apply. The worst that's going to happen is that you don't get the job or you don't get an interview. But the best thing that could happen is you get a chance to try and prove yourself, and to show them that you have something to offer, even if you don't check every box. And I think the last important one for me to share is that, you know, ask questions. I've been in situations where I've been in a room of men who I would typically call like alpha male personalities. Like they kind of talk louder, and there's very strong presence in the room. And sometimes I've been in situations where they purposefully try to talk in terms that they know you're not going to understand, or they know where that level is, and they're trying to purposefully talk around you or talk over you. Don't let them do that. Stop and ask, what do you mean? What does that acronym mean? Can you explain this differently? You know, you only you can know when is appropriate, and obviously sometimes it may not be appropriate, but stand up for yourself and make sure that you understand what they're talking about, or at least be able to make a note to go back and research it later so that you can be more knowledgeable about it. And these are all things that, for me, being rather shy and rather, you know, withdrawn, I just let happen for many years and didn't realize that I had a voice that mattered in the room. And now it kills me to see other women especially sit there quietly in the corner and not say anything when you know that they have questions or that they want to talk about something.
Right. We talked about how important continuing education is. I think Jean and Rebecca both mentioned it. And so that idea that you have to check every box on an application, or you have to know every term that people are talking about in the room, is kind of a fallacy just to begin with. It doesn't really happen. And so I think that concept of, you know, be ask questions when you need to, be more assertive is good, is really wonderful.
Yeah. And to the continued education thing, like especially in cybersecurity, it's what I call alphabet soup. There is a new acronym every day. There is no way you're going to know what all of that stands for, and most of them have more than one meaning.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. That's when you know how long you've been in the industry, when you go like 15 layers deep with the same
Right.
Kiara, would you like to go next?
So I would agree with Dana. Speaking up, that's something I had to learn within my internship. So I landed this internship, what turned into me being a SOC analyst. I started as working in project management, which was not ideal for me. It was interesting to see, and it was great to be able to enter the company, but there was 2 other women there at the company, and the rest were men. So I had to communicate to my coworker who I was working with. She was our project manager, and I just kept expressing my interest to stepping into the SOC and getting more work in the SOC. And she communicated that for me, and I had to speak up as well and tell them, yes, this is what I'm looking for. And whether that was taking weekend shifts, working the 4 a.m. shift, I had to prove myself, and that's what I did. And so joining my new company, Markham, my problem was not asking questions, trying to figure things out on my own when maybe I didn't know the answer, maybe I did, and I just need to dig a little deeper. And I would get feedback constantly, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. And that's something I had to learn along the way. And I found someone in my company, the other young lady that was working in my office, and she kind of is like my mentor in the office. And she's been teaching me along the way. So now I ask questions. If I don't understand something, I'm going to ask. If it's a documentation that I don't fully understand or I just can't find what I'm looking for, I'll go straight to my manager's office and say, hey, I'm having a problem. Do you mind explaining? Can you tell me what I'm missing and how I can fix it, or what should I be looking for? And that's one of the things I had to learn as well. Growing up, I was very timid, and speaking up is so essential, especially as a woman. And letting them know that you actually know things. You may not understand it at first, but you actually know what you're talking about in the work, and you're able to learn from your mistakes as well. So speaking up and going after what you want. So that definitely.
I think you brought up an important point about not getting trapped into a positioning, because I think there's a lot of steering of women into certain jobs. And if there's something you want, you have to ask for it, go for it.
Rebecca?
So the vice presidential debate, that there were moments of that where it's like, oh, I know what that was like, especially when she was like, I'm talking, I'm talking, when Kamala was doing that. I was like, I've been in that room. So that type of, talking over a person, I've also had the many times, more than you can even imagine, numbers of times where we'd go around the room and give suggestions or project ideas or stuff like that, and I'd say something, and then 10 minutes later, some guy would say the same thing. I'm like, wait, I just said that, and it's like as if it was his own idea, and everyone's like, oh, that's a great idea, but when I said it, it was not a great idea. It was just like, so that being the invisible, that was really, that whole invisibility. And we see that a lot in what women and also people of color are really trying to fight for right now, not being invisible. And, we have, a foothold here, we have a stake here. And so I think, that was really harsh. In the law, it's much more egalitarian because we have women, and this has been for quite a number of years now, women are graduating from law school, and even the top law schools, at about the same rate, because that's what the acceptances are as men. So it's about 50-50 now. But that does not mean that the law firms are 50-50. It's still very difficult for a woman to make it to partner in a big law firm. And I should be qualified to do a lot of, and I do bid on patent work, do patent reviews or patent types of defenses of patents and claims and things like that. But and I'll interview for those jobs. And I won't get, and I know I have, because they call me because I have all of this experience in these different companies I work for, and I very rarely get hired for patent work. Now I should say that the work that I do is very well paid, but patents can pay, you can get ridiculous money. I mean, as a patent expert, doing a testifying expert, I know people in Silicon Valley who easily are pulling down $1 million a case, and I don't get that. I'm not saying that I want it for the money, but again, it is another disparity where I have engineering degrees, so I should be able to get patent work, but I just don't get picked. And so I think there is still pockets of discrimination in legal expertise. But again, in engineering, there's fewer women in engineering. So maybe as we rise up more in STEM, then as the generations go along, it'll be easier. But right now, I think there's still a lot of bias. So, but I don't have the problem of not being heard anymore. But I think it's because I leveraged myself out of the types of jobs where I might even still be experiencing that.
I think, when when women's numbers are small, right? You have a small percentage, you end up in a huge number of meetings where you're the only woman, or you're
Yes.
at a board
Yes.
meeting or something. And
Yeah.
so it's one of the things that I think is super valuable about the women in cybersecurity groups. Kiara put up a couple in her slides, is that you go to these meetings and you get to see that although our numbers may be
Not
small
alone.
percentage-wise, there's a lot of us out there, and it's really great to sometimes feel like, oh, right, there's a bigger community out there that we can be a part of if we want.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
sadly, we're out of time for today. So I'm going to end the questions there and stop the recording.